This is the Health and Politics podcast. Prevention is the new cure.
And that's with former ministers Steve Brine and myself, James Bethell.
Good morning, James. It's a hot one. Now, you're not wearing a jacket. Is that because you're hot, or is there another reason?
Steve, you're totally busting me. It's very, very unkind of you. You know that I told you in confidence before this that I had left my jacket in my Lime bike basket in a moment of early morning forgetfulness. I'm unbelievably frustrated about it because I've got to go to a conference and I've got a meeting at the department and then I've got to go to a dinner, all without my nice blue jacket. I'm going to blame this on my allergies, Steve. I woke up feeling hay fevery and distracted and confused. And if I've made a small sartorial catastrophe this morning, it's because of my allergies. Steve, allergies are a really big deal.
I left my book, my notes book, with all of my notes in a Lime bike basket
never put
recently.
Them in the basket.
But I then went back where I'd parked it, and it was still just all sitting there. So you never know. Your Lime bike might come back round again with James's jacket in it.
Maybe. This is central London, though.
Yeah. Well, look, it's a warm one, and it's episode 99 of our little podcast. Now, James, last week we were talking in great detail, if you remember, about Burnham v Streeting, and my goodness, it's the story that's absolutely everywhere. But there's been quite a developments on it since, obviously, because the Blair comments yesterday, which we'll come on to in just a second, and then obviously Andy Burnham and where Streeting feel that they have to respond. But what I spotted in the weekend papers was, when you put the band back together, the band plays the greatest hits, and Burnham's back on the stage, and of course he's replaying some of his greatest hits. So I noticed that he's been saying stuff about the death tax, which you will remember in 2009, before they left office and he was health secretary. He proposed this idea of a social care tax, which was dubbed the death tax, and all the parties said they wouldn't take part. I noticed that he seems to have willed that out again. If he were to win, if he were to become prime minister, it would be significant for the health system. What do you think?
It would be hugely significant. And for the economy, it has landed, I think, very badly. Certainly Tony Blair, and we're going to talk about it in a moment, pointed out that this is a country that really can't bear any more taxes. But both you and I know that we do need to somehow fix our social care system. A lot of the pressure on our health system comes from the failures of management in the social care system. So listen, I am chuffed and pleased that he's raising it as an issue, but I'm not sure the old solutions are really going to address today's problems.
I agree. And that's what I sort of wonder about the whole debate is that, is this a debate that is from another time, from people who were from another time?
Retreads, I know.
It is a bit retready, isn't it? Then if he says he's sticking to Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules, should he become prime minister? Well, then that's not going to work. But let's just say he does. Then, well, okay, he can't borrow more in order to fund the social care revolution. Then he'd have to take it from somewhere, or goodness me, whisper it, think a little bit differently. On the subject of which, just before we get into this week's agenda, obviously, former Prime Minister Tony Blair, big intervention this week. It's been the major news story in politics, but everywhere this week, basically. He made some pretty insightful comments, did a big 5,000-word essay, but also did broadcast media interviews yesterday, Wednesday. This he said on BBC Radio 4's Today programme about health.
The whole of healthcare this is part of this artificial intelligence revolution. It's going to revolutionise drug discovery. It allows you, if you use data properly inside the health service, to engage in a completely different way of organising your healthcare system. People are already, if they can afford to, for example, these weight loss drugs, right? We've got a programme that makes them available to quite a small number of people on the NHS. Outside of the NHS, people who can afford to are already buying them. So it's not that this whole debate about are you privatising, in inverted commas, the NHS. But when I was in office, we improved the NHS and we doubled the spending on it. But it's a different world today, and you've got both the opportunity and the responsibility to do healthcare completely differently.
Wow.
I know. We should have him on.
We should.
Steve, I've got to admit, I agree with him 100%. I mean, he's been criticised as being a cheerleader for AI, and there's been some quite scurrilous accusations that this is simply subtle third-party advocacy for his clients in big tech. Well, yeah, he is very close to AI, and some of his cheerleading is a bit over the top, but he's basically right. the world has totally changed. When you go to California, when you look at the private health industry here in London, if you look at what wealthy people are doing with their own health, it is miles apart from where the conversation in the NHS is. And we need to close that gap. I mean, it's just crazy, the conversation we're having at the moment about health.
But when you think that Charlotte Refsum, who's a friend of the podcast and has been on with us both as a guest and a guest co-host, obviously they did this big report on GLP-1s, and you hear his comment there about them, which we've talked about with Charlotte. I guess what he's saying, isn't he, is look, come on, politicians, get a grip, lift your gaze, look ahead, think ahead, because actually the public, the consumer, they're way ahead of you. They're way, way ahead of you. And GLP-1s is a big example, isn't it?
It's such, NICE have been very clear. 3.4 million people should be on GLP-1s. Yeah. Crystal clear, black and white. And yet we're going to spend 11 years to get there. I mean, why does it take so long? That is crazy. Whereas people in the House of Lords, I would guess 25, 30% of the peers are on GLP-1s. There are a number of people walking around who suddenly look great. They're smiling, they've cheered up, they've lost a ton of weight, they're clearly healthier, their brains are working better. Why is that not available to people in Blackpool and Barnsley? I mean, it's not very expensive, not very difficult to deliver. And the NHS and the politicians and the Treasury are turning their backs on this big opportunity. I mean, it is completely crazy, really.
So final on this, what I suppose is interesting, isn't it, is Burnham, Streeting, Raine to a lesser extent, and Blair. They're having this intellectual argument with themselves about the future direction of the Labour Party, which I just feel like, can a government refuel in flight? We tried this, didn't we, as in the Conservative government? We tried to have some of the intellectual conversations when you're in office. It's very, very difficult to do. You're navel gazing.
I disagree. Listen, you have to have the conversation when you have to have the conversation. You don't get choices on these things. I just am sad that there hasn't been any intellectual renewal, and that they had so many years in opposition to have this conversation. What on earth were they all doing? Well, the answer is that they were dealing with Corbyn and with the anti-Semitism and the nihilism and the Marxism, and that somehow drowned out any sensible conversation about what the future of progressive politics should look like. Well, what a damn shame that they didn't try harder to come up with a better analysis of where this country should be.
Because we're wasting time when they should be just getting on and implementing and looking ahead. You and I are in and around and out and about in the health world all the time. I was speaking at a big health conference yesterday, and striking how many people said to me, out there is, he's right, isn't he? Not just on health, but generally speaking on the message and the way that because he sort of has clarity of thought. And there are people who have no time for Tony Blair and mention Iraq and don't like the guy, but actually he's probably chimed with a lot of the public mood in a way that number 10 killed for. And I'm sure number 10 are not very happy at all with his intervention. But he's still clearly a big figure, isn't he?
The only other people doing that at the moment in a big way are Reform, Danny Kruger, and sort of Team Carswell. They are in a clunky, I find the thinking awkward. I don't agree with it all. But they are at least trying to rewire the British state in the spirit of Margaret Thatcher. That is what we need. We are in a completely implausible situation at the moment, and we need a reboot. But, it's frustrating that there aren't more people putting their shoulder to the wheel on that.
Well done, Blair. Maybe we should get him on talk about healthcare. I love his thinking on health. Anyway, welcome along. This is episode 99, which is The New Cure. We discuss the big stories in health and politics every Thursday. Thanks for listening to the show. If you hit subscribe, you'll get the episode as it drops. You can email us hello@preventionisthenewcure.com, and we also have a WhatsApp number 0333 404 6507. Busy show this week, including a guest, which James has teased already. More on that in a moment. So we're going to start talking about the extreme heat and why it presents every bit the health challenge that cold weather does.
And then we're looking forward to chatting with Adam Frost, Professor Adam Frost, who leads the National Allergy Strategy Group. And we're going to talk about his newly published allergy strategy. And
we're really
my struggle
to
keep a hold of my clothes.
Yes, on that note. And then we're going to look at 2 exciting positive stories, because we really like to do this on the podcast. We like to look ahead to where innovation is going to help us. As we do that wherever We're going to talk about making a success of the lung cancer supermarket screening program, and a really quite incredible story that was doing the rounds earlier this week of a new cholesterol beating treatment which could prevent a lot of ill health. So we're looking forward to all of that. Let's go back to the top, James. Let's talk about extreme heat danger. Now, obviously, much of the UK experienced extreme heat this week. It's cooled a little bit today, Thursday, down here. I'm guessing not in London, but over the bank holiday weekend into this week, temperatures have comfortably beaten the 30 degrees. I think Kew Gardens had a 35 on Tuesday. So here's a question for you, James. Are heat waves being treated by the public, do you think, and the health system as a genuine health emergency? Or, as I once said to a select committee, are they being treated as barbecue alerts rather than health warnings? What do you think?
I think it's normal now. I mean, we just shouldn't regard them as exceptional. I think massive downpours in the winter and heat spikes in the summer are what we and our children are going to live with, and we need to adapt accordingly. In Spain, people turn on the air conditioning and stay in during the hours of 12 to 4 and have a siesta for a reason. And we're going to have to embrace the kind of siesta disciplines around heat. In London, with a combination of heat exhaustion and also the pollution, emergency wards in the major hospitals spike more during the summer than they do during the winter with flu. So this is, from a health capacity point of view, now become one of the biggest challenges for healthcare leaders. And we should try to plan our health system around it.
Yeah, I remember when I did the public health job, appearing before the Environmental Audit Committee, which wasn't the health committee, obviously, that I would regularly appear before. So back in 2018, I think it was. I was really nervous about it. I used to quite enjoy appearing before select committees, strangely, but they had this inquiry, heat waves adapting to climate change.
Yeah.
And, they really put me to the sword on what were we doing. And sort of looking back to that, if you think about come the end of the summer or even before that, in our old department, they have meetings, they're planning for winter pressures, aren't they? But less instinctively are they planning for summer pressures.
Absolutely.
And I guess that's why I said, heat waves were still not being treated by the public as a genuine health emergency. And that's why I said sort of the barbecue alerts thing. But
no, that's right. I mean, we've got better about drinking water, but if you're a child in California, you are taught as a child all sorts of heat disciplines about drinking water, staying out of the sun, looking after your breathing, sleeping well. We need to be taught that stuff. I mean, we're good with the frost, and we know how to wrap up warm, and we know how to, and we have winter fuel payments. We don't have air conditioning payments. We don't have drinking regimes for people. We don't have water being given out at tube stops. We need to adjust to the fact that Britain has now become almost a less temperate place to live. We are more tropical, and we should act accordingly.
I think the point I was making sort of 6 years ago, and I guess it's probably still the same now, is that it's the old challenge, isn't it, in healthcare, just sort of fragmentation of responsibility, because what that committee wanted to know is who owns heat wave preparedness across government. And the answer is complicated, isn't it? So it's our old Department of Health, on sort of health impacts and then the response to that. But of course, if you're just responding to people being taken unwell because of the heat, then you've failed. You could read that across any level of prevention. Then there's DEFRA and their climate adaptation stuff. Public Health England, as it then was, now obviously rolled into the department, and NHS England, they sort of ran the operational heatwave planning. And then, of course, you've got all the local authorities, Department of Directors of Public Health. All local authorities are now public health authorities. Therefore, they've got a big role in preparedness. But I just think, as ever in healthcare, isn't it, is that it's the very young and the very old that are most vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's the same in
that's
cold,
right.
and that's the same in heat. But we're a long way from doing it. I suppose the other side of the argument, which let me put this to you, when it's really cold, people say, "Oh, why don't we have snow chains, and why are the trains not better at running in cold weather?" And the answer that maybe not unreasonably comes back is, well, because it's not really, really cold that often. And the answer, you can answer the same in heat, but I suppose what you're saying is that, look, these events are going to become more and more regular, and therefore we are going to have to do the planning and make the investment.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these problems are not. I mean, we had a flooding problem because we hadn't cleaned out our waterways. I mean, it wasn't really a climate problem. It was a cleaning out the waterways. And I don't think we've got a heat problem. We've just got a handing out water and making sure people wear suntan cream problem. This question of national resilience, I mean, I could go on about it for ages, frustrates the hell out of me. We are pathologically poor in this country about trying to build a resilient nation. That's true in terms of national security in our armed forces. It's true in our health service, and we don't have a reserve for the NHS. And in things like climate, we wait till the last minute and we're scrabbling around buying antifreeze in the spot market during the winter. I mean, it's just a British disease, isn't it? It could be different. We could get better at it.
Yeah, it's interesting, sort of linked to this, just finally, is there was a story earlier in the week, riskiest skin cancer cases hit UK record high. The number of new melanoma skin cancer cases diagnosed in the in a year, listen to this, risen above 20,000 for the first time in the UK, according to Cancer Research UK. Really?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
had a melanoma on their foot from exposure to the sun and died. I mean, it's age 53.
Yeah, earlier this year, I had this mark under my eye, and I thought, it was a bit dry skin, and I went to the GP, and they looked at it under the magnifying glass. I'm not sure.
Magnifying glass, Steve?
Yes, she literally had a magnifying glass. It was. I felt like
Winchester, digital technology not arrived in Winchester yet.
I should save Winchester. This was in London, but she looked at it under. She had a handheld magnifying
with her
glass.
candle and her owl.
Dr. Quinn, medicine woman.
Oh, no.
She looked at it and she said, "I'm not sure. I'm a bit worried that could be a melanoma, but let's refer you." Anyway, they did this thing called a scrape, which was a bit like carpaccio ham across the top of it. And then they
put
tested
leech on it.
yeah. And thankfully, it wasn't anything sinister. But I said, well, it's interesting because I'm really careful. I wear a hat and wear my sunglasses over that bit of my face a lot, and I'm always putting cream on. But they said, no, it's probably skin damage from when you were much, much younger.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting, isn't it? So again, the younger and the older, when your skin is young and fair and more liable to damage.
Well, can I just say, in trendy Notting Hill, when I went to my NHS GP, I phoned them up and they said, could you take a photo of it and then SMS it to us? And they ran it through their AI and SMS'd me back 11 minutes later and said, it's nothing to worry about. We've assessed it and you can stand down. So
was there a magnifying
I can
glass
give you the
on
name
that?
and address of my NHS GP. You may want to upgrade from the magnifying glass approach.
Oh my goodness, if only I was unkind enough to say the name of the surgery, but I won't do that. I won't do that. I play a lot of golf, as you know, and what happens now in golf, and I'm really glad that this happens actually, is that they have the sun cream dispenser by the locker,
quite right.
by the
That's
lockers.
The spirit. There we go.
And they really, and if I find that it's empty, I go and tell the pro shop. My God, they must hate me.
Right.
But, it should always be, shouldn't it? Because you should be coating yourself in this stuff before you go out on the golf course.
For the fees you pay, you deserve more and better suntan cream, Steve, honestly.
I do, James, and I just deserve a nice insect repellent, nice smelly one as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
go on.
This has taken unexpected turns. On that note, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back and talk about allergies.
Welcome back. This is Prevention is the New Cure. And now we're going to talk about allergies, and I'm really thrilled to have Professor Adam Fox, Chair of the National Allergy Strategy Group, with us. Last month, we saw the publication of the very important piece of work, the National Allergy Strategy, a real doorstopper and big intervention on this tricky subject. It represented the first coordinated UK-wide approach to addressing long-standing gaps in allergy care. And boy, oh boy, I think that's very strongly needed. Around 1 in 3 people in the UK live with a condition where allergies may be involved. And that includes me. Me and all of the men in my family have very bad hay fever. My wife and all the women think that we're all faking it. But for me, it's really serious. I mean, I quite often spend 2 or 3 days in bed with a fever of above 100. I've taken all sorts of medicine. Used to take testosterone. My doctors told me I'm not allowed to do that anymore. I take Echinase. I've tried all sorts of ways around it, but it really hits me hard. And now my 2 sons also get it. I don't know why it's a strain in the men in the species. And oddly, when we drink a certain type of white wine, often quite good Burgundy, all three of us start sneezing like mad. There must be something that the French put in the wine that has the same effect. And we have these huge, big sneezes, and it's very embarrassing, but quite funny at the same time. So, Adam, my sneezing problems are not a big national problem.
No.
But allergies in the round are. Tell us, how's the allergy strategy landed? What kind of reception have you had?
I think a very positive one, actually, because the one thing, and this has been my experience over the last couple of years, even just talking about it in the first place, is we don't get anybody sort of pushing back and saying, no, this isn't a problem. I mean, the robust data that we have, for example, around anaphylaxis, so the most severe form of allergy, which is potentially life-threatening, we've seen a trebling of presentations of anaphylaxis to emergency departments over the course of just 20 years, from 1998 to 2018. And anyone that's read the horrific reports of fatal anaphylaxis that has impacted, sadly, on a large number of often young adults, so teenagers and young adults seem to be the ones most at risk of having fatal anaphylactic reactions. You can't read those and think that there isn't a need to do something about this, particularly when you dig into these cases and you realize that the mistakes that happen, the avoidable harm that's happening, it's just the same thing time and time again. And recently I had the opportunity to meet one of the DEFRA ministers around something called Owen's Law, which is a suggestion that we're going to have full disclosure of ingredients on menus in restaurants, which is hugely important. And that was a campaign led by the family of Owen Carey. So Owen Carey died from fatal anaphylaxis on his 18th birthday when he'd been a buyer of a burger bar, had asked for a chicken burger, had told them that he had a severe milk allergy, but it wasn't labelled on the menu. There was a miscommunication by the staff.
It was a very sad story.
Horrible. About 2 years earlier, another 18-year-old, Shahida Shaheen, went into a burger bar in Manchester where she ordered a chicken burger that had been marinated in buttermilk, the same as the one that killed Owen Carey. Told them about her severe milk allergy, but it wasn't on the menu, and there was a miscommunication with the staff. This was literally a carbon copy, the absolute epitome of avoidable harm happening again and costing the life of a young person. So, needless to say, there's been little pushback about whether we need to change.
And before we go into the details of of those kind of preventative measures, and I know Andrew Rayner has lent in hard on this and may well do more. Can I just ask you, what has caused this explosion, and what could we be doing to try to have more resilient children? Because is it the two things that are often cited is firstly the cleanliness and in which we now bring up our children. Farmers' children don't get these kinds of allergic reactions because they're mucking around in the farmyard and are exposed to all sorts of dirt and mess when they're young. Is that part of it? And then secondly, our world is now full of man-made and new chemicals and products. Have we created an environment that is frankly toxic for quite a lot of people? And do we need to rethink the way in which we put chemicals and toxins into people's lives?
Well, look, I'd start my answer by saying I'm currently in my clinic, so I've taken a few minutes out to chat to you, which is great. But the child I've just seen has come down from Wiltshire. They live on a farm, and this child has got very severe allergies. So there's a lot of urban mythology.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of urban mythology here. And the mother of all of these urban myths is the clean child theory, the hygiene hypothesis. And this came from the 1980s and was this idea that because our immune systems aren't stimulated when we're little, they develop inappropriate responses, and hence there's more allergy in an environment where there's less typhoid and diphtheria and all the other nasties that used to get us. And where this theory came from was a epidemiological study in the 1980s by a guy called Strachan, who noted that you seem to get more allergies if you were the older child. So there was what we call a birth order effect. So you were more likely to have hay fever if you were the older child than the younger child. So the theory then went, well, the older child is born into a more sterile environment, has little microbial pressure on them and develops inappropriate responses, whereas the younger siblings are born into a household where there are older siblings who bring all the nasty bugs back from nursery, and consequently there's more microbial pressure on their immune system, which matures more quickly and more appropriately, and therefore doesn't develop allergies. But it was not a reproducible phenomenon. There were plenty of large birth cohorts that didn't show this effect. And essentially there were big holes in the theory. So we've sort of moved on from that, but it absolutely entered the public consciousness and has stayed firmly there. The prevailing theory now is much more related to our gut microbiome, although not just our gut microbiome, but the colonies of bacteria that populate our gut, but they also populate our skin and our airways as well. And we know that the constituents of those colonies of bacteria have a very significant impact on the way our immune system develops and the way that we develop a relationship with the outside world. And if you look back over the time course of when we've seen this large change and growth of allergic disease, it very much coincides with, for want of a better word, westernization. So if you look around the world at which countries have the highest rates of allergy, it's very striking that it's places like Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Canada, geographically very disparate, but culturally very similar. And within those environments, there's been a number of factors that have significantly influenced how our gut bacteria develop. So, for example, many, many years ago, when we were born, most people were born at home and some people were born in hospital. Whereas these days, pretty much everybody, with a rare exception, is born in a hospital environment. That has a major impact on which bacteria will colonize our guts. Rates of cesarean section, nutrition, breastfeeding rates, ultra-processed foods, all of those antibiotic rates, all of the other things that you've alluded to, all of those things have an impact on which bacteria develop in our gut, and that in turn has an impact on how our gut and our immune system develops a relationship with the outside world. Now, it's not just about that. There is a very significant genetic component to this. But of course, the fact that, the first guy that described hay fever 200 years ago took 9 years to find another 28 people who had it before he could write a letter to the Lancet, whereas now 20% of UK adults have hay fever, that clearly isn't a change in genetics, because that just wouldn't happen in 200 years. But alongside a pre-existing genetic predisposition amongst a significant proportion of the population, together with these changes that have impact on our gut bacteria, seem to have brought about this perfect storm that's led to this marked increase in allergic disease. Now, we are only in our infancy of understanding all of this.
This is fascinating. I know you've got to go back to your clinic shortly. So looking at your report, it's striking that allergy sort of being repositioned alongside other chronic conditions, and you sort of really stressed the prevention, the early intervention, which is why we wanted to talk to you. So it's much sort of a systems reform strategy. It's a clinical strategy. And I just wonder, what response are you getting from ministers in our old department, in other departments? How much do you think, given that it is a systems reform strategy, if you agree it is, how much help are you getting to drive this change?
Well, I would say positive in the sense that we've had good engagement. We had Sharon Hodgson, the relevant health minister, at our launch. She clearly sort of got what we were talking about. We've had long-standing relationships with the long-term condition teams at the Department of Health, who have been excellent at supporting us in our work. They've always, stressed that they can't endorse what we're doing, but we have something called the Expert Advisory Group for Allergy, which I co-chair as chair of the NASG with a senior policy advisor from the long-term conditions team at the Department of Health. So they're sort of, very, very much sort of we're in this alongside us, helping us and being critical friends. Where we are now is that we've been advised that we are going to get a formal response. It's going to take a few months, and that's fine. We're playing the long game here. But I think initial noise is that there's a much clearer recognition that there is a need for work in this area. And thankfully, alongside the work of the Department of Health, we've also been working with the Department for Education. And we'd already sort of pulled that a little bit of the work out from the main strategy because of the urgency of it around sorting out the safety of children with allergies in school. And we're thankfully, with our really collaborative working with the Benedict Blythe Foundation, we're able to get Benedict's law across the line, which means that from September, and this is seismic for the allergy community, that from September, all schools in England will have to have an allergy policy in place. They'll have to be training their staff around allergy. They'll have to be ensuring that there are spare adrenaline injectors in case of severe reactions. Really big things that are a step change in terms of keeping kids in schools safe when they have allergies, because our track record previously was just shocking. There are a number of deaths that entirely avoidable that happened in the school setting because of just a complete lack of understanding of how to prevent it and how to deal with it when it happened. And that's now going to change, and that's great. And I think that for me is sort of an example of what we can potentially achieve with our strategy by working as a whole allergy community. We represent specialists as well as the major charities. We've done loads of work with engaging the wider community to make sure that we're speaking with one voice, and finally actually getting that to land in the right places.
James.
I mean, you speak about it so persuasively. We could talk a lot more about it. What I'm taking away from this is that there isn't an easy way out. We're not going to wish away our allergy problem. We're not going to somehow give peanuts to babies and there'll be no more anaphylactic shocks, which is what I had, I rather hope that was the solution. But the way you're talking about it, it's not that. We're going to have to adjust to cope with and stop the adverse outcomes from these allergies. And the report is a very, very persuasive and thoughtful step in that direction. So, Adam, thank you very much indeed for your work. If people do want to find out more, Adam, where would you point them at?
So with the National Allergy Strategy Group has a website, nasguk.org. Have a look at the report. It's deliberately quite a detailed, long read.
Yeah,
There's a lot in there,
hefty one.
But we've got an awful lot to do. So yeah, I think that's the best way to start getting involved.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed for your work, Steve.
Adam, thank you, and thanks for mentioning Owen's Law. I used to be in the MP for Winchester, and Owen was a constituent of mine. So
right.
I raised it in PMQs once, actually, and actually one of the early days of this podcast, so episode 13, back in summer of 2023, we actually had his sister Emma and his dad Paul on the podcast to talk about it. So if anybody's interested in hearing more about Owen's tragic story, and it really is a tragic story. He was such a lovely lad.
We're coming up to the 10-year anniversary of his death.
That's right.
So his family have worked incredibly hard to sort of, get this back on the agenda, and successfully so, thank goodness, because it will save lives.
Yeah, well, lots of love to them. And thank you very much, Adam, to you, and pass on our thanks to your team. And we'll post the link to your report, your strategy within the show notes. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you.
Right, Adam goes off to his surgery, no doubt busy clinic. God, that was interesting, James. Did you feel we were in the therapist's chair a little bit?
Listen, he was totally persuasive, wasn't he? I mean, I have been a bit, although I have allergies, I've been an allergy skeptic, and he put me in my box, didn't he? And we're going to have to focus on this problem and learn to live with it. Isn't it funny that so many of the conditions that we're having to battle with on mental health, obesity, and allergy, they're sort of human-made, and we've kind of conquered the biological world. We're doing well against big diseases, and it's dealing with consequences of humankind that are really the big medical challenges of today.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Well, thanks, Adam. And as I say, we'll post the links. Okay, couple nice positive stories that we wanted to end the show with, James. So, mobile NHS scanning units strategically placed in supermarket car parks, sports stadiums, high streets across England, they detected lung cancer in 10,000 individuals. So there's new figures that have come out this week from NHS England. And crucially, this is the key point why we did it in the first place. And we put it in the long-term cancer plan when I was the cancer minister. More than 3/4 of those cases have identified lung cancer at early stage 1-2, which was, critical, and what we wanted to, why we did it in the first place. And if you remember, a lot of the drive for this came out of our dear former colleague James Brokenshire, who died of lung cancer a number of years ago now. And he thought that this would pick up early stage disease, and it looks like he was right.
Listen, this program is absolutely iconic for this for our show. It is the single greatest example of where prevention can make a big difference. Now, this is a particular type of prevention. They are identifying people who have smoked, who are at high risk of lung cancer, and trying to triage them to make the system efficient, and then scanning them. So it's not really preventing you from getting disease; it's early detection of the disease.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to split hairs on that. I think that I'd be happy to settle for that being prevention of late stage lung cancer, which is a miserable thing to happen to you. Steve, I went and had my lungs scanned. I smoked when I was running the Ministry of Sound quite a lot, and hated it and was very glad to give it up. But I got a telephone call and was triaged, and it was a very smooth, impressive system that I went through. I actually didn't qualify for the scan because I'd given up quite a long time ago, but I ran into Jeff, who runs In Health, at a party the next night, and he talked about what he was doing. So I went down to Romford to the Tesco car park and met the team. I can't tell you how professional and thoughtful it was. There was a long queue. They did about 100 people a day, all worried, mainly men, but some women. And they would do 200 people a day, and they would find two people with cancer, one of whom would have late stage cancer, and at that stage, one of whom would have early stage cancer. The early stage cancer person would be treated and would largely be put back into health, and the person with late stage cancer would be put on, frankly, a different type of pathway. So that was then. I'm pleased to say that the conversion rate is now much higher. They're doing 3/4 stage 1. So they've clearly improved the algorithm. The most striking thing about the conversations was the use of data. The greatest concern that they had was that they would identify someone and then they would be lost in the system and not picked up by the GP. And that would create huge legal liability and clinical risk. And being able to deal with ICBs and the flow of data and the data from the GP to the hospital, really complicated. And to have the systems in place to double check that everyone was being passed along the pathway correctly required just an enormous amount of very, very thoughtful work in our creaky, arthritic health system. The fact that they were able to provide those guarantees on a national basis to the system, was just incredibly impressive. And that's one of the reasons that holds back a lot of the screening program. So listen, I'm a huge evangelist for this, not just for what it's been able to do for lung cancer, but as a template for all the other screening programs that are out there, prostate being a really good example.
Yeah, well, look on James's LinkedIn, you'll see the picture of him in the scanning machine and visiting the team there, which we'll share onto the show socials with a link to this bit of the discussion.
Yeah, my lungs were fine, by the way.
What I really liked about it is that, yes, there was the use of data and inviting people in, but obviously, rather crudely, it was based on some pilots that we did in Greater Manchester and Liverpool, and rather crudely, it was sort of going to areas where we felt there may be the highest incidence, industrial areas, etc. But what I really like about it is it's sort of a really great example, isn't it, of the NHS taking healthcare to the public rather than the other way around. And I suppose the genius of the supermarket scanning idea, it wasn't technological innovation because CTs existed, but they existed behind walls where you have to pay in the car park. It was just the behavioural and the public health innovation that was what made it work, what we thought might make it work. And given these figures today from NHS England, I'm deeply that it has, and I know that Lancashire would be delighted and would be thrilled at the news, I'm sure, this week that it's detecting early stage disease in people. Anyway, that's a good one, and a bit of good news. Final bit of good news is this story on new cholesterol treatment, James.
I know, it's incredible, Steve. You may have caught this one already, the one and done cholesterol story making the headlines. It's called Verve 102, which, by the way, I think is an excellent name, and it should be a new romantic band, but it's not. It's a cholesterol drug. It's a single injection for life, rather than having daily statins or regular injections. My goodness, I have cholesterol problems, like a lot of people, and that's incredibly attractive. So what it does is it switches off part of the PCSK9 gene, a gene heavily involved in regulating LDL, which many of us listening might know is the bad cholesterol. And by reducing the PCSK9 activity, the liver removes more LDL cholesterol from the bloodstream. And by the way, my liver could be doing a better job of removing my bad cholesterol, please. I mean, I take daily statins. It's not a big deal. It's worked really well for me. I've been really lucky, but I would definitely take a lifetime injection if I could do. And it is so exciting that there are breakthroughs like this that really do proffer up the possibility that for a lot of these chronic sort of lifestyle-y type conditions, we might literally have cures on the doorstep.
Yeah, well, it goes back to where we started the conversation, that we're ending the conversation with Blair talking about how, this is not about being in the pocket of AI. This is about recognizing AI and technology is going to help us, and it could just save us. And this trial is focused on people with familial hypercholesterol at the moment. But of course, you can understand the read across if this proves successful. And the early stage results from the trial are absolutely extraordinary. I thought you explained pretty well what it actually does. So yeah, really, really pleased to see that. There was a report on BBC News, which I presume is still on. It was on the BBC News at 10 on Monday evening, actually, which is where I spotted that. I wanted to talk about it on the show this week. But unlike statins, as you say, which they rely on a long-term adherence to take, this is literally a one and done. It's a preventative intervention cardiovascular disease, obviously being the biggest killer still on the planet. So really good, really positive, and well done to the scientists involved in that. We will look forward to seeing it develop as it goes on. And that's it, James. We're done for another week.
Fantastic. Well, what an exciting episode. God, Adam was good, wasn't he? I thought he was just the kind of person we need writing reports like that.
Yeah, very interesting. So thanks for listening to the podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it. As I said, you can WhatsApp us 0333 404 6507. You can email us hello@preventionisthenewcure.com. We said at the start, James, this is episode 99. That must mean, I had a good education, that next week is episode 100, believe it or not, of this podcast. And
Steve, do you want to say anything about what we're doing for episode 100?
I will, James. We are going to go along to our former department. We are going to go into the Department of Health and Social Care, and we are going to talk to none other than the Chief Medical Officer, Professor Whitty, who is a good friend of yours and mine, and a real interesting thinker, and obviously a very familiar face to many, many people, not just people interested in health and politics. So we're going to talk to Chris for our episode 100 about all sorts of things, obviously prevention related. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, nice to see you. Stay cool. This episode is produced by Shortbread Media. We are part of the Shortbread Media family, and this episode is edited by Timothy Pomp. We'll see you next week.